Hello, everybody. We are now here. This is us, and we're at ASI 2020. Big event here tonight, and more people are joining us as each moment goes by. So we're very excited about having you here and having you join us. This is such a different way of meeting and getting together, and we're all learning. So expect a few glitches along the way, as I'm sure you found as you've been signing up and trying to get onto Whova and trying to get onto Zoom. But we'll make it. And in the spirit of getting together when we can't get together, this is it for us. So I just want to say welcome to everybody. We are online, first time ever. It's being held August 24th and 26th. And we're streaming from Charlottetown, PEI, which is unceded ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Very privileged to be here. And we also are working to be inclusive and have simultaneous translation available, French to English, English to French. And we will be giving you some instruction as to how best to do that. So before I go any further, what I would really like to do is begin in a traditional way and invite Julie Pellissier-Lush to provide us with an opening prayer and song. So Julie, if you're able to turn on your video and join us now with your mic, that would be great. Thank you.
And Mayor Brown, while Julie is doing her start, if you could turn off your video.
There, now I think I am good to go. Am I good to go, guys?
Wonderful. I'm so glad you're outside.
I wanted to be outside on this beautiful day. We have to enjoy every moment we can now that old home week is done. Now, the prayer that I thought that I would share tonight was for everybody watching, everybody who will watch it later. If they're going through a hard time coming into this, I wanted to give them one of my teachings that I was told on how to look after yourself throughout this, and whatever they're bringing with them to this, it'll help them to work it out. And it's called When Things Are Bad. When things are going wrong and you don't know what to do, ground yourself. When your heart is broken or your spirit is blue, ground yourself. When you feel all alone and wish someone was there, ground yourself. When your self-worth is low and your sadness just seems to grow and grow, ground yourself. We know the hardships that you fight, and every day is a struggle to make things all right. Ground yourself. Open your heart so it can try and heal. Ground yourself and breathe. Sit by running water and feel the earth between your toes. Let the negative energy back into the ground. Your hurt is real, and you are a hero for all that you endure in just one day or just one moment. There are hearts that love you, eyes that long to see you, ears that long to hear you, and arms that long to hug you because you are loved. And remember, when things go bad, to ground yourself. And that was a teaching that I was given from an elder who, during some very difficult workshops, she would go outside and she would go lay down in the grass and she would rub her hands on the grass. And she said that was her way of getting rid of any of the negative that accumulated in her heart or in her mind. And then when she came back in the room, she had a fresh heart and a fresh mind. So if you ever feel the need to try to get rid of some of that negative energy, that's what you do, is you just ground yourself and let it go into Mother Earth, because Mother Earth will look after us. And I wanted to share a song, so I got my boys out here to come and help me. And this one is called the Gathering Song, because although we're not gathering as we would usually gather, we are gathering in a way that virtually. So we need to still celebrate that gathering. And this one is called the Gathering Song. And it was written by George Paul. So I hope you enjoy. Walalio, thank you. And one last thing is I'm Julie Pellissier-Lush. I'm the Poet Laureate of Prince Edward Island for 2020, and I welcome you all as I am Mi'kmaq and I reside in this traditional territory known as Mi'kmaqi. And I would like to welcome you all in peace and friendship. Walalio, thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. Just feel very privileged to have you here with us today. And I think we all should be very honored and have a chance to read through Julie's bio. She's a very accomplished person and our Poet Laureate for Prince Edward Island. So again, thank you very much. And thank you to your drummers as well. We really appreciate having them here. So before we go further, just want Julia Abundo, who is our summer student this year, just to give you a little heads up on how you can adjust your translation and make access to simultaneous translation. So Julia, I'm wondering if you might do that for just now so that we can, anyone who here is wanting translation services can have them. We will have French speaking speakers during the event. And we also may have questions that come in French and English. So I'm just going to turn it over to you, Julia.
Perfect. Yeah. So if you look on the toolbar right underneath your video, you'll see a little symbol. It's a circle. It almost looks sort of like a globe or a circle with a bunch of curvy lines in it. It says interpretation. So if you click on that, you'll be able to switch between English or French language options. So if you go in the French channel, you'll be hearing, if someone's speaking in English, you'll be hearing our lovely translator, JC, speaking to you in French. And if it's a French presentation, excuse me, you can flip into English and that will be translated for you as well. You have the option of hearing the original audio a little bit quieter than it normally would be, or you can mute it altogether. So that's the translation piece.
And could you explain that to our French-speaking participants as well?
Oui, absolument. Alors, il y a un symbole en bas de l'écran. Ça, c'est pour l'interprétation ou la traduction. Alors, vous pouvez choisir entre anglais ou français, probablement français. Quand il y aurait une présentation en anglais, vous pouvez juste choisir la langue française dans le menu d'interprétation et notre personne en charge de traduction vont vous parler en français. Et ça va être plus simple que de lire des sous-titres ou quelque chose comme ça. Ça va être la traduction en temps réel.
Okay, thank you very much, Julia. Really appreciate that introduction so everyone can listen in their own language and make sure that we're all feeling included in being here. So the next thing I would like to do is to introduce you to our board members who have been extremely productive and helpful in what we're doing. And would like to ask them if they could turn on their video just now and wave at all of you.
So what Patsy will do is call your name, and if you could give a wave to everyone as you hear your name.
Okay, Malcolm Shookner, Robert Cow, Rebecca Francis, Susan Hartley, Emily Late, I know Kathy Leslie, Erica Michaud, Eva Sock, and myself. So us. Some of us are students and are studying right now and not able to be here tonight. I'm not one of those, I'm here. So, and so is Malcolm, and there are a number that have waved to you already. So that gives you some idea of the representation on our board. I'm going to next ask if the people on the program design and planning committee can just turn on their videos and wave. I won't read out your names. They're up on the screen, so you have a chance to see who's there. But anybody who is here tonight, I know a lot of people are working on presentations and may or may not be able to join us, but please give yourself a wave. So just take a moment to do that. Okay, and then we'll be looking at our staff. And this is an amazing group of people who've been working long hours and with great dedication and enthusiasm to bring this event to you. So we have Julia Abundo, Claire Chilton, Ann Gotts, who is from Germany, Chantal Peng. All of them are young, they're students. Julia is at Memorial University, Claire is at Queen's, Chantal is at Acadia, and Anne is Furtwagen University in Germany. And they're here to join us, and they've been working with myself and Kirsten McKnight, a consultant with the Quaich, and Wendy Craiglin-Gauthier with WKG Consulting. So that wraps up the group that has been working very hard to bring this event to you and bring it live. So I'm going to turn it over to you folks for a minute and just ask if you can write in the chat. Now, this may be where you are asking questions about how you can do it. And I'm going to ask Wendy if she might just let you know how to set up your screen so that you can actually write a question or an answer to a question. And it's a pretty simple one this time. It's going to be, what province are you from? So we get a sense of who's in the room.
So folks, you'll notice that we have the chat disabled in Zoom itself because we'd like to have all of our chat and questions and answers found in Whova. So when we are logged in to our Whova session and you click the link to join the Zoom presentation, you still have Whova running in the background. So the trick is to minimize your Zoom screen enough so that you can find where your Whova screen is hiding. And when you find...
I'm sorry, I'm trying to access on my phone. That doesn't, I don't have that option, so.
Yes, Samantha, I'm going to explain the phone option in a moment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, so when we're on the desktop app, if you are looking at the session, you'll notice when you join the live stream, to the right of your screen is the session Q&A and the chat. So we have our moderators who will be keeping an eye on the chat and the Q&A. So the chat is where you can just, share those common interests, maybe share resources and links. Perhaps you are connecting with another conference participant. And the Q&A is specifically a question for the keynote speaker or for someone who is speaking at the time. And the moderator will moderate those questions and make sure that the speaker has the has the information to respond to that Q&A. Now, Julia is going to come in on her mobile phone, and Julia is going to explain, those of you who are on a mobile device, where the Q&A and the chat is in your session.
Yes, so thanks, Wendy. I'm actually going to try and share my screen here so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So let me
So as she's sharing her screen, she's just having to ask it to allow some of the permissions in order to share.
Don't think that's going to work right now. So here's what I'll tell you.
Okay.
There's a box where you have the video right at the top of your screen, and underneath that should be the session Q&A and the chat. So you should have a box where you can see the video, and you should see, well, nothing right now because I'm talking and I don't have my video on, but you should see a box for the video, and if you tap that, you're going to see the Zoom toolbar underneath that, and then right at the bottom of your page, you should see the session Q&A and the chat, where you can see people are already typing where they're from, which is lovely. So I hope that helps. If not, shoot me a message and we can troubleshoot your problem.
I also understand that there are some people who are watching the live stream who are finding this a bit confusing right now. So I'm thinking that we should probably, if people can manage as best they can for this session, we can spend more time tomorrow morning if anybody is still finding it confusing. So I hope that helps to move it on, and that we can continue with what we're planning on the program, and would really like to call on Chantal to bring greetings from some of the dignitaries. So one of the first dignitaries that we want to hear from is Sean Casey, who is a member of Parliament for the Charlottetown area in Prince Edward Island, and he's bringing greetings on behalf of the Government of Canada.
Hi there, I'm Sean Casey, Member of Parliament for Charlottetown. As you know, Charlottetown is the headquarters of the Atlantic Summer Institute. On behalf of the Government of Canada, I wish to welcome all of you to this year's program. Our government has been proud to support the work of the Atlantic Summer Institute through the Canada Summer Jobs Program and other programs. I've had a chance to take a look through the program for this year and see the emphasis on policy approaches to mental health. A very timely theme, especially with the added stresses and pressures on people as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our government has and will continue to invest substantially in mental health. We saw that through the most recent health accord and also through infrastructure spending here on Prince Edward Island. Probably the most tangible example is the public safety housing project that will go on the site of the old Hillsborough Hospital, a federal investment of $50 million. I have accepted an invitation to participate in one of the panels during the conference. I very much look forward to that, along with the representatives from other levels of government. To all of the delegates and participants at this year's Summer Institute, I wish you very productive meetings. I look forward to observing and participating in those discussions. And welcome to Charlottetown from wherever you sit. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Some great greetings from the Government of Canada, and some good thoughts to consider as we move forward. Our next greetings will be from the Minister of Health and Wellness from Prince Edward Island, Minister James Aylward. And again, I'll turn it to Chantal.
Hello, my name is James Aylward, Minister of Health and Wellness for the province of Prince Edward Island. And I'm here today on behalf of our Premier, Dennis King, and in my capacity as Minister responsible to welcome you. Mental health has always been a very serious concern, but it has been made no less apparent than through this pandemic. Addressing our mental health needs has always been a top priority of myself and our government. And I'm proud of where we are going to address mental health with the ongoing development of a state-of-the-art mental health campus and continued funding to support new positions within the field. We all understand that mental health isn't a static objective to move toward. It is a moving target, and we must work hard towards new solutions that continue to meet the needs of those who require support. There will always be a need for new ideas and forums just like this one to prompt further discussion and generate new ideas for the future. So I want to thank you again for participating. I wish you all the best in the discussions to come. Have a successful conference. Thank you.
Just trying to say thank you very much for bringing greetings on behalf of the government of Prince Edward Island. So we will, at this point, we have want to hear from Mayor Philip Brown from the city of Charlottetown, and the city is actually supporting the keynote and sponsoring the keynote address tonight. So I'm really pleased and happy to again have them as a sponsor and invite the mayor to bring greetings. And he will do that by sharing his screen.
So Patsy, I want to say thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Bonjour tout le monde. Good evening, distinguished guests, delegates, and presenters. Yes, I'm in live video. I'm not being taped, and I'm very pleased to be here tonight. The City of Charlottetown, birthplace of Confederation, is pleased to be a sponsor, a proud sponsor of the Atlantic Summer Institute on Healthy and Safe Communities. I'm honored to be here virtually this evening at the keynote address and opening ceremonies of the 2020 Atlantic Policy Forum on Mental Health Promotion. While this is the first time participating as an online conference, I am pleased this group is still able to come together, as mental health is more important than ever during these uncertain times. According to the Canadian Mental Health Association, 46% of Canadians are experiencing anxiety or worry due to COVID-19. The conference theme, Upstream Investment in Mental Health Promotion, the answer to the mental health crisis, is so relevant and critical as we navigate through these challenging times together. As Canadians, we are so fortunate that mental health is at the forefront of many discussions, and this conference demonstrates your commitment to the industry and to all who benefit from mental health supports. As was said earlier by MP Sean Casey, the federal government has made a $50 million investment in the proposed new mental health and acute care campus, along with Minister Aylward, who talked about that this will replace the Hillsborough Hospital. And last week, Patsy, we had the opportunity to do a site visit of the site. This will encompass approximately 82 acres plus of campus grounds for this new mental health and acute care campus, which I think is a huge step in the right direction for mental health wellness. At ASI 2019, the forum focused on supportive environments for child and youth mental health. ASI 2020 aims to increase understanding of the importance of infant, child, and youth mental health for the whole society and foster policy actions to influence upstream investment in support of mental health. Mental health has become more prominent in recent years, with special concern about the mental health of children and youth. Inclusion is known to be a key indicator of mental health and well-being in a very diverse society like ours. We believe this to be critical not only in Charlottetown, but right across this great country. This evening, the keynote speaker, Trish Hennessy, Executive Director, Upstream Canada, she will address a collectivist vision for an upstream mental health approach, moving from me to we. I would like to take the opportunity to thank Ms. Hennessy for her guidance and expertise on this important topic. I want to thank the organizing committee and the partners involved in this conference. It has been a pleasure to bring greetings this evening. The City of Charlottetown, birthplace and Confederation, supports your work in ensuring we all live in healthy and safe communities. Stay safe, stay healthy, be smart, stay apart. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very, very much. Really appreciate you being here, and hope to hear from you again through the evening. So thanks so much. And before we move on to our speakers, I also want to acknowledge our sponsors. and we could not have done this without. So these are just the highlights, and we have a couple of videos from Medavie and TD, who are Medavie, our keynote presenting supporter for this year for the event, for the forum, and our title sponsor, TD, who has been sponsoring our youth leadership program now for several years. In addition, we have our bronze sponsors, Bell Let's Talk and the City of Charlottetown, and a large group of organizing partners who have been just so instrumental in supporting the speakers, the program, participating. And we really want to this year, acknowledge the, this is very difficult. As you can tell, I'm working very hard to, I want to acknowledge the, I'm trying to find my, I'm just realizing with Zoom, it's a little bit different than some of the other platforms I used to. So just bear with me here as I get going. So this has been just tricky, sorry. So these are the sponsors that we have. And we also want to acknowledge the generous support of the Secretariat du Québec aux Relations Canadiennes for their tremendous support this year and in supporting having Quebec expertise showcased during this forum. So again, thank you. And Chantal, I believe you have a couple of videos that you can share just to let us know a little bit more about our two major sponsors, our presenting sponsor, Medavie, and our TD Youth Leadership Program title sponsor. Thank you.
Medavie exists for one reason: to improve the well-being of Canadians. We're tireless pursuers of the gaps in our healthcare system. We help fill them with people, with data, with new resources, and new ideas. Medavie Blue Cross understands health with long-standing partnerships and insights into everything from common illnesses to prevention. We adapt and evolve to enable better care and help people live their best lives. Medavie Health Services is the on-the-ground expression of better healthcare in action, from paramedicine to home care. Our teams are delivering care outside the hospital to patients when and where they need it. And through the Medavie Health Foundation, we invest in community-based initiatives that address some of our most pressing physical and mental health challenges. As a not-for-profit health solutions partner, we aren't just hopeful about the future of healthcare in Canada, we work to improve it every day.
I think there's one from TD as well.
During these challenging times, we believe it's essential to continue working with community organizations that help bring people together, even when we're apart. And that's why we're supporting 60 music and cultural festivals in a safe way across Canada this summer through the TD Ready commitment.
Okay, well, we feel extremely fortunate to have the support that we have. And when I'm talking about organizing, we thank the sponsors, but we also want to really acknowledge these organizing partners because they not only provide resources, funding resources, but also human resources that make this possible. And many of them are speakers throughout. So again, a big thank you to all of you. And we'll move on with the program with the first presentation, which is with Malcolm Shookner, who is the president of the ASI board and who will be sharing his screen and highlighting consultations that took place in Atlantic Canada this spring on mental health promotion. So Malcolm, I'm going to turn it over to you.
So after last summer's ASI 2019 about supportive environments for mental health, we were given some direction that we need to be looking at policies that support upstream investment. And so the board of directors thought about how are we going to focus on policy in the coming year. So we decided we would have a series of consultations that across the region that would build connections with each province and also identify upstream policies and programs that promote mental health, beginning in the early years, identifying best practices, gaps, and areas for potential action. I'm going to minimize the video here so you can see the whole slide. So you can see with the 6 regional consultations, pretty good distribution of participants across the region. 4 in one in each province, and an Atlantic consultation with the indigenous communities, and an Atlantic consultation with Francophone communities. So our 4 goals for this spring consultation were to have a shared understanding of upstream approaches for promoting infant, child, and youth resiliency and mental health, and a shared language for working together. And you'll notice we added infant in here because we learned over the last little while of the importance of not only the early years, but from birth practically, and even prenatally, that the conditions in which a child is brought into this world can really set the groundwork for future mental health. And we'll be hearing about that on our panel tomorrow. Second goal of the consultation was to be familiar with legislation, best practices, and research on mental health promotion for infants, children, and youth, including values underpinning the policy actions. The third goal was to understand the links and relationships in the work of their respective organizations, and to identify policy questions to be addressed at the ASI 2020 Policy Forum. This is a graph of the participants from diverse backgrounds and sectors that came together to provide insight into mental health promotion in their respective communities and provinces. And you'll notice there are a lot of people from the mental health system and health promotion, and then as well from education, from policy development, social emotional learning, evaluation research, safety promotion, crime prevention, and even funding. So a good diverse representation amongst the participants. The questions that we posed for discussion in those sessions, which turned out to be virtual, when we set out to do this, they were going to be face-to-face consultations, and then COVID struck, and we decided we would proceed with support from the Mental Health Commission of Canada and others with a virtual consultation. So the 4 questions were: how are organizations in your province or community currently taking action on legislation, policies, and practices that promote infant, child, and youth mental health? How could we take action collectively in the future to influence upstream policies that promote infant, child, and youth mental health? Who is involved in your province and community now in developing policies that promote infant, child, and youth mental health? Who could be involved in the future in developing and implementing upstream policies that promote infant, child, and youth mental health? So those were the 4 questions, and I'm now going to give you a summary of the recommendations by province and for the Indigenous and Francophone consultations. So in PEI, collaboration between different services and programs, for example, ASI working with the Child Advocacy Office, education to help people to understand the effects of adverse childhood experiences, improving education even before people are personally impacted by mental health, involving everyone in the topic of mental health, build up resilience before emergency strikes, and connect knowledge of the different services and programs available. In New Brunswick, we were engaging with policymakers in conversations that highlight the importance of mental health, the role of umbrella organizations to bring groups together, such as the Social and Economic Inclusion Corporation, collaboration between researchers and community, for example, mental health and family violence, communication with government early on and consistently about mental health, promoting equity through the design, development, and implementation of policies, a framework for shared decision-making to use in an authentic and engaging way. Transformational leadership is needed from the top, and a common understanding of mental health across cultures. In Nova Scotia, it was suggested we be addressing income-related policies, including federal and provincial governments, cross-departmental and cross-sectoral in conversations about mental health, so a whole of government approach, collaboration between community and government, intergenerational and complete family solutions, sustainable funding for long-term programs and policies, focus on school system supports for children and youth, such as youth health centers, and education for decision makers on social determinants of health and upstream investment. In Newfoundland and Labrador, the integration of programs in schools, including the seamless transition for those exiting incarceration, raising government awareness of community organizations and networks, a whole society approach, including government for effective solutions, online resources for youth, collaboration among like-minded people for upstream investment, investment in youth mental health in schools, decreasing the student guidance counselor ratio, more job opportunities for psychologists in schools, mental health training for teachers and school staff, and research on early investment in mental health. Recommendations from Indigenous communities across the region, collaboration of all First Nations and Aboriginal peoples that represent the different communities, engagement with policymakers, engagement with elders in mental health conversations, involvement of people in community work, such as health directors, education directors, and support workers, best practices to help communities, such as First Nations wellness teams, understanding intergenerational and historical trauma and how it manifests in mental health, connecting provincial and federal work, and addressing funding issues. There's a risk of lack of funding for culturally safe services. And from the Francophone communities, again across the region, fight discrimination based on language, culture, and against immigrants. Educate parents to recognize the signs of poor mental health in teens. Share resources throughout the Atlantic provinces, inclusive of Francophone and Anglophone organizations. Encourage positive social media messaging from a young age. Include LGBTQ+ individuals and groups in discussions of mental health. And broaden networks for mental health promotion. You can see there were some common themes that were brought out across the consultations, also some unique ideas that emerged from them. But as an overall summary, we were looking at policies to systemically promote community efforts through sustainable funding, collaboration among communities, agencies, and different levels of government, upstream programs featuring equity, early engagement, and best practices, and research on early investment in mental health promotion. And we asked what people thought the role of the Atlantic Summer Institute should be. And we were told that we should play a role in education, in connecting stakeholders, in sharing knowledge, and investment of resources. And this is what has informed our ASI 2020 policy forum. And you'll find that over the next 2.5 days, this is exactly what we will be doing. Now, the results of these consultations highlights were sent out to all participants in the consultations, and as well as to the premiers of each of the provinces, along with an overall summary of themes across the region, so that we get a broad look at all the ideas that emerge from that consultation. You will be involved in the next 2 days in helping us to unpack and explore the policies that are needed to invest in upstream, and will help us to formulate a policy agenda that will be a result of our time together, and that we will take to the Atlantic premiers in the fall. So that's what we have done and what we plan to do. And we're looking forward to your help and participation over the next 2 days to help us in doing that. Thank you for your attention. I am now going to unshare my screen. Okay, back to you, Patsy.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Malcolm. There are a number of questions that are in the chat, which we want to make sure that you, in a little bit of time, start working on the discussion of the Q&A. And that's for those people who are here actually logged into the session. There are also a number of people who are taking this all in on the online option through YouTube. And there are places where you can ask questions there. And we do have one of the staff who's monitoring those questions and will bring them forward as well. So we just want to say welcome to everyone who has joined us from outside of the forum and inside the forum. We're really happy that you're here. Malcolm, I think what you were expressing was the fact that the consultations were wide-reaching, invited a lot of groups. Not everyone was able to participate that perhaps might have liked to, but the reach was wide, and that we really invite those people who were part of those consultations to join us in the forum discussions, and also new people who perhaps weren't and who can provide us with some additional resources and organizations that might want to be involved. So this is an opportunity and a springboard to say this is the work that we're doing in trying to respond to the needs in Atlantic Canada and engage people that are here. But we know we have more to do, and that's really where your assistance comes, and that's the momentum we're trying to build, is how can we create a more inclusive and more welcoming Atlantic Canada? How can we share our lessons learned from Atlantic Canada with the rest of the country? How do we engage others from across the country and through internationally in the work that we're doing? And already when you have a chance, for those who were involved, if you can look at chat, you will see that there are people here just tonight inside the forum who are from Germany, from Quebec, from all 4 Atlantic provinces, from Ontario, and from, actually, there's someone here from Victoria, BC, and I'm sure there are others that perhaps have not just signaled where they're from, but we just want to welcome all of you here. It's wonderful to have such a collective in this space. We can't say in this room, which is what we normally would do, but in this space. So this is our virtual room, our virtual space for the next little while. And for those of you who are watching, we welcome you as well. And please ask your questions, and we will try to get back to you as best we can. So next on our program is the opportunity to showcase some work that's happening in Atlantic Canada, and that's Upstream. So these are programs that are already moving forward. They're putting policy into action. They're investing upstream. And just to give you an idea of just how broad a range there are and over what age groups in terms of engaging youth and whole society we are moving toward in the region, I'm going to turn it over to Kirsten McKnight, who will introduce the videos from 4 different projects, which will then be on exhibits later. So I'll have Kirsten take it over from there. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I get the privilege of introducing the Atlantic Community Showcase. Now, one of the hallmarks of ASI is the showcase, and that's because we get to promote the work that's happening in our local communities. So this year, to go along with the theme of the forum, we're showcasing forerunners in upstream work in our region. The 4 groups we'll hear from tonight are moving upstream policy to programs, like Patsy mentioned, and they should be commended for their work. We'll show a 3-minute video from 3 of the groups, and then a 3-minute PowerPoint slideshow from the 4th. Now, we'll see these tonight, but throughout ASI, we encourage you to visit the exhibit section of HUVA to learn more about these groups, to ask questions of them, and you'll be interacting with these folks during the workshops throughout ASI as well. So we really encourage you to get to know others as much as we can on this online forum using the community boards and checking out the speakers and the attendees list so that you can facilitate further communication and more work on this stuff after the forum is over. So first up is, and Chantal's going to be my video meister for this one. First up is Raising the Villages. Now the representative we have attending ASI for Raising the Villages is Jim Mustard, and I believe his colleague Amanda Knight will also be participating. So remember those names when you get to meet them in your workshops. You're going to want to ask them some questions. So here's their video. Chantal?
Upstream, why, what, who, how. We are raising the villages, Mawiomi, Wijit, Mijuajik, and our mission is the early years, starting strong, creating welcoming spaces to connect and belong.
Here's a 3-minute short story with a long reach. around the necessity for change based on a shared understanding of what over 30 years of research and evidence has proven, that the environment you are part of early in life get under the skin and affect trajectories, both positive and negative, for our lifelong health, physical and mental, behavior, and ability to learn. And this is a call to action that is inclusive of all sectors of our society around what's needed for a universal upstream approach. And just as these two butterflies that look so different are actually the exact same genetics with just a few degrees difference in the chrysalis stage, making for such variation, we now know that the architecture and wiring of our lifelong healthy development is a constant dance of nature and nurture, most happening long before school entry. And so why are we still losing ground? The reality is we're still working in specialized silos to treat the downstream effects. Well, we need an upstream model where municipalities and communities can co-create welcoming spaces that coordinate and integrate what's needed to reduce the vulnerability of our youngest citizens, address systemic poverty at source, and not target low-income families because everyone needs support. Here in Nova Scotia, where the Ivany Commission on the Economy came up with a #1 priority for action being the early years, we here in Western Cape Breton have aligned our efforts around the ask for communities to develop pilots around that, what welcome would be for our youngest citizens, and to be guided by the First Nations narrative of family and community.
To track our efforts, the Early Development Instrument is used across Canada to provide a snapshot of the brain's development when children enter school. The town of Revelstoke in British Columbia has used the EDI since 2001 to mobilize their whole community, track changes, and significantly reduce vulnerability upstream. From all that we have learned, Raising the Villages is now advocating for the development of welcoming spaces that offer a continuum of support, services, and programs from prenatal to school entry across Western Cape Breton. With the increased social isolation brought on by the pandemic, we sense that the idea of a safe, welcoming space for our youngest citizens to belong to an attachment community and connect to what they need is even more a priority. Plans have been developed for a pilot to help demonstrate and provide evidence that a well-coordinated, intergenerational, food-secure, culturally rich, and fully integrated center for a community works for all citizens and especially our youngest. What we need now are responsive provincial policies that support upstream community-based pilots that work from a First Nations narrative of family being connected to community, and from our infants to our elders, we all have a place to share our love.
Thank you, Jim and Amanda, for sharing that one. And if anyone wants to have a closer look at any of these videos, the Raising the Villages video had a lot of pictures and a lot of information on there that I know I'd like to go back and pause and read. You can do that by going to the exhibit section on Whova. So next up is a group named Chances, and they're out of Charlottetown, PEI. And Jessica Redden, who's the family program coordinator, she's our attendee at ASI. So you'll be able to face with her throughout the event.
Chances is a nonprofit charitable organization that's offered community-based programs to young PEI families for over 25 years, reaching approximately 6,000 individuals annually. Chances programs and services include prenatal programs, Best Start province-wide in-home visiting, early learning and childcare, parent support and information sessions, after-school programs, a family health clinic, and in partnership with the Department of Justice, supervised visits for high-conflict families. Chances programs address social determinants of health by working collaboratively with our staff and families. But don't take our word for it. Meet Melanie, a parent who's been engaged with Chances throughout her children's development.
My family was not happy, to say the least. My dad didn't talk to me for a few months afterwards because, well, I was 16 and I was pregnant and it was just me at that point. I wouldn't have gotten through it without Candace, who was my Best Start worker. She motivated me like no tomorrow to stay in school, and some of the parenting programs, for instance, I've learned a lot from them. They've helped me be able to understand the kids. I decided to put my kids into the Smart Start program with Chances because I feel that Chances is a big family. My daughter is now in kindergarten this year. The first thing that immediately popped into my head was Smart Play. The Chances family has just done so much for me.
In 2014, Chances established a family health clinic using a nurse practitioner model. The goals of the clinic are, first, to become an integrated part of Chances' continuum of community support, and second, to improve access to the PEI healthcare system for unaffiliated individuals and families. The past 6 months have been challenging for all of us, with our agencies, staff, and families having to contend with direct COVID-19 anxieties and uncertainties regarding personal illness, the well-being of family and friends, concerns about employment, and the collapse of work-life boundaries. Add to that the indirect stresses related to social distancing and trying to engage socially through virtual mediums such as Zoom, and we have a lot to deal with now. And more to consider as we look ahead to a possible second spike and to the challenges that will be associated with the coming of winter. To try and get ahead of all these curves, we surveyed 300 Chances families about their levels of online comfort and connectivity. We then developed modules on technical, social, and practice adjustments to expand practice virtually across Chances' 3 program domains. Want to find out more what's going on within the Chances family? Come visit us when it's safe to do so, or visit us virtually anytime.
Chances, along with all of the organizations we'll hear from tonight, and probably most of your organizations, have really had to learn how to be creative to navigate in this pandemic world that we're dealing with right now. We're able to have some steps back toward in-person events in some cases, but we're all learning together. And I hope that throughout the forum, as you get to know others, you're able to share some of your learnings. Now, next up is Mama Moments, and this is a program that's run out of Voices of Youth in Newfoundland and Labrador. And Jeannie Piercy, who's the coordinator, she is the representative of Mama Moments who will be attending ASI. And here's their video.
You can't tell me? That was really funny.
Mama Moments is a support group for moms and children. It's many opportunities for nurturing teachable supports. We provide a group each week, which involves a free cooked meal, child minding, transportation, but also we provide wraparound support for these moms and families, which includes housing, education, employment, and anything that these families may identify they need support with.
It's a good spot to get a break and relax and have people around you who are just like you, and it's a good learning experience, and it also creates a lot of friendships around the way.
All around support. Doesn't matter if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, we have support, and we're just one big family.
I was in a really rough spot at the time. My kids were in care, and it was really hard for me. I guess with me is just having the support and actually getting out once a week to just chill out and talk to the other moms that are pretty much around the same boat that I am.
Support for Mama Moments can look different in many ways. It could be helping a mom do daycare subsidy applications, apply for income support. Education employment is huge. We've had a lot of success with moms going back to school, finishing their high school, doing post-secondary. It could, from an outreach component, it could be myself doing home visits within the home, supporting moms around things like parenting plans.
We do everything when it comes to learning. We have legal aid come in if there's any parent questions on like legal support with your children. We do everything from learning how to make cakes to how to build a relationship at home.
Each week when we get together, we certainly try to have fun activities, some shared learning, and also an opportunity for moms to check in.
We do a lot of different things. We get to volunteer with fundraisers, sometimes the Geo Center or McDonald's, or just something different to look forward to. And It's a great help.
You know, they inspire hope in each other. It's a peer-to-peer model. And at the end of the day, you know, without their own strength and courage and resilience and their ability to seek support and their willingness to learn from others, Mama Moments wouldn't be as successful as it is today.
The fourth and final organization we're going to hear from tonight in the Atlantic Community Showcase is the Nunatuavut Community Council. And I'm going to invite the Manager of Natural Resources, Charlene Kippenhuck, to turn on her microphone and to share her screen. And she has a short PowerPoint presentation. So she's going to tell us about their work.
Hi, thank you. I'm just going to try and share my screen here, if I can find the presentation. I just want to thank you for inviting us to present at this great conference. And I was just going to give you a quick brief overview of NCC, and then I'll dive right into what our community-based climate monitoring program is. So Nunatuavut means our ancient land, and it is the territory of the Inuit of Nunatuavut, who reside primarily in South and Central Labrador. And on this slide, you can see all of our communities. And I'm currently actually in Charlottetown right now. And we have about 6,000 members that are spread across the land and also across Canada. We are people whose identity is shaped by the land, the sea, and the ice. That's why community-driven research is important, is integral to our way we do our research in our communities. It's because of our deep and enduring relationship with our natural environment around us. Climate change has major impacts on our mental well-being. If we can't get out on the land, it's because of bad ice. We can't access our food, and we can't access our lands. And as Julie described earlier, we can't get grounded, and we can't ground ourselves if we can't get out on our own land. So our community-based climate monitoring program is oriented around 7 key climate indicators that you can see here on the screen: sea ice, freshwater ice, water temperature, sea level, freshwater levels, invasive species, and health and seasonal timing of plants and berries. It is NCC designed the community-based climate monitoring program that will be community-led, community-driven, and will engage community youth, elders, and other people who go out on the land. So we have 3 different tracks. It's our youth direct ice and water monitoring track, our out on the land track, and our elder climate knowledge track. And this multi-track design will facilitate intergenerational transfer of knowledge and help build youth skills. Specifically, the project aims to gather and increase both Indigenous knowledge and mainstream scientific data on our chosen climate indicators. Our youth direct ice and water monitoring track, our youth go out onto the land in their 2 chosen sites within their communities, and once per month we'll have direct observations, capture all this information in their notes and photos and videos, and they're taking temperature readings and water pH and all that good stuff. And they do that once per month. currently we have Charlottetown and St. Louis that have been doing monthly measurements, but we are working on including some more communities along the way. Our Out on the Land track, we do interviews with adults who go out on the land to hunt, to fish, to trap and harvest berries and medicinal plants and other plants. And our Elder Climate Knowledge track, we try and gather information from our elders through observations or recollections and their stories that they want to tell us and what they've witnessed over the years that may relate to climate change impacts. And we're hoping that our youth will also be involved in doing both the interviews for our elders and for our Out on the Land adults as well. So far, we have conducted 31 interviews that were primarily men. So in our future activities, we want to focus on some of our elder women, and we're trying to do some focus groups with women and with men, and we're also engaging youth from other communities such as Norman's Bay and Black Pickle. We have signed up, we just haven't had the chance to do any training with COVID-19, stopping all of our face-to-face meetings. But we're hoping that we can continue to do that here in the near future. And I just wanted to say thank you again. And we have lots of good knowledge from our elders and from our youth and our adults that be out on the land. And this picture here is just a snapshot of one of our, we have a stewardship workshop for our department every year where our members will come together and we can talk about all the work that we're doing. And this was totally about climate change, and this is what our members were talking about during that session. And so thank you very much, and we'll be here. I'm going to try and stop sharing my screen. Okay, there we go, found it. And yes, come drop by the exhibit, and if you have any questions, we'll try and answer it there.
Great, thank you, Charlene, and thank you to Jim and Amanda, Jessica, and Jeannie as well. And we'll turn it over to Patsy, our MC.
Thank you, Kirsten, and thank you to all the presenters and all the work you've done in creating your videos and sharing your projects. We've had a question come up as to where can we access those videos again. And for those of you who are attending the forum, they will be shown again in the exhibit section of WUFA, and you can ask questions there. You can interact virtually with the presenters. So please take advantage of that. And they would love that. They really want to share what they've learned. So it's just a super opportunity for everyone. What I'd like to do now, if we could move on and have Malcolm introduce a keynote. And Wendy, do you think everyone feels comfortable enough now to open up the two windows and know how to ask questions when we move into the Q&A section before we get started with the keynote speaker?
Yeah, so just very quickly, if your Zoom screen is taking up the whole of your monitor, you can minimize it. If you're on a Mac, just use the yellow button. You can also press Escape on your keyboard. Zoom opened up into a new window, so Whova is running somewhere in the background, so you need to find the browser that you entered. When you click on the Whova center, click on the Whova agenda, you go to tonight's session, which is the official welcome and opening. And when you come into that session to the right of your screen or by tapping in the middle of your screen to get the options, you will see the session Q&A and the chat. So in the session Q&A, that's specifically for questions for the keynote speaker to address. And Patsy and Malcolm are doing the moderation of those Q&A. I believe it's Patsy that's taking the lead on the Q&A. But also continue to use the chat for just side conversations, sharing resources, and you know, you'll notice that we're not responding immediately to those chat. The glory of having it in Whova is that while we're finished listening to the folks who have spoken, conference people will come in and respond specifically to those questions from their expertise. And we've got Malcolm back, and I'm just going to get Malcolm to do a mic check. He was having some difficulty with his connection. So Malcolm, you want to turn on your mic?
All right, how about that?
Excellent, you are good to go.
So
Okay.
Malcolm, I'll ask you to introduce the keynote speaker.
Okay, I got back just in time. I'm very happy to introduce Trish Hennessy, who is the director of Upstream, a project of the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives that is dedicated to policy solutions that foster a healthy society and community well-being. Trish is also a senior communications strategist at the CCPA. She's focused on the eco-social determinants of health, sustainable development goals, income inequality, decent work, and an inclusive economy. Trish was the founding director of the CCPA in Ontario, which is a progressive think tank that focuses on provincial and municipal social justice and economic issues. She co-founded the Ontario Living Wage Network. She was the founding director of the CCPA National Office's Growing Gap Project, which began in 2006. Trish was a former newspaper journalist, originally from Saskatchewan, but she now lives in Toronto. She has a BA in sociology from Queen's University, a BSW from Carleton University, and an MA in sociology from Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto. We're very much looking forward to Trish talking to us about going from me to we to promote upstream investment. Trish, it's all yours.
Thank you, Malcolm. It's such a pleasure to be here. Craig? It's such a pleasure to be here. And I just want to clarify, the title of that talk was written before the We scandal. Just to put that on the record.
Yes.
Look, I'd really like to thank the Atlantic Summer Institute for your leadership on expanding the conversation about mental health to focus on the value of upstream solutions. You're doing amazing work. Those consultations and recommendations were super impressive. And I want to just give congratulations to the organizers for putting together such an interesting agenda over the next few days and, under trying circumstances. Although we were all supposed to be meeting in person in beautiful Charlottetown today, clearly COVID-19 had other plans for us. So here I am, I'm speaking to you from my condo in Toronto, which is located on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Wendat, Haudenosaunee, Mississauga of the New Credit First Nation, and Huron Indigenous peoples. And together with other First Nations, these peoples created a treaty in 1616 that covered a massive stretch of land from Wisconsin through the Great Lakes Basin to the St. Lawrence. And it was called the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, where the dish represents the land, the water, and the air that we all share. The dish with one spoon concept feels more relevant than ever as we navigate through a global pandemic, an experience that we're all sharing, though not equally, and one that we must navigate through together. So by now, we're long past the shock of COVID-19, the virus that shut down the world, the economy, and the relative predictability of our lives. Millions of Canadians have lost their ability to earn a living because of the pandemic. They risk eviction, mortgage default, food insecurity, homelessness, and mental health struggles. And those who still have a job either find themselves on the front lines risking exposure to the virus, or they work from home, perhaps isolated and also caring for family members at the same time. And, you know, maybe they're grieving. Canada has recorded over 9,000 deaths so far related to COVID-19. And so there's much to grieve and there's a lot to feel anxious about because we don't really know what the future holds. And yet there is so much that we do know. We do know that we have been tolerating rampant income inequality in Canada, the likes of which we haven't seen since the 1920s, with little action or even outrage to address it. We know that we know about the rise of precarious work, which is infecting all lines of work. Even people who work in professions are subject to precarious working conditions. And COVID's impact on the economy may be exacerbating precarious work. We know about the refusal of a lot of governments to make the minimum wage a living wage, or to ensure income adequacy for people who receive social assistance. For youth, there's the reality that you need an education, a higher education, to get a job today, but that also entails racking up a student debt the size of a mortgage down payment. And then, of course, navigating the education system in the middle of pandemic brings with it its own set of stresses and challenges. For young Canadians who do manage to land a job and start their family, they soon discover that Canada has no coordinated national early learning and childcare program for children under 4. And as a parent, it's now your job to find childcare that is often so expensive, it's the size of a monthly mortgage payment. So what does any of this have to do with mental health? Well, these are just some of the stresses that were already there for Canadians, and especially young Canadians, even before COVID-19 struck. And now they're compounded by a pandemic that has disrupted the childcare sector, disrupted classroom education, disrupted academic careers, and the working lives of many Canadians. And this disruption is resulting in dramatic consequences for our mental health and well-being, and especially for women and youth. A recent Statistics Canada survey shows that younger Canadians and women are less likely to be reporting better mental health outcomes in the middle of this pandemic. And this is especially true for households with children under the age of 18. Their ability to meet financial obligations is a major source of their stress. Canadians with a compromised immune system, people with diabetes or chronic conditions affecting lung, heart, kidney, they're also less likely to be reporting better mental health outcomes during this pandemic. And those survey results tell us something. The findings suggest that family stress due to confinement is a really important factor. It's significantly associated with worse mental health outcomes. But those families aren't alone in their stress. A recent York University and UBC survey indicates that the number of Canadians who report fair or poor mental health has tripled during the pandemic, rising from 8% before COVID-19 to 24%. More than half of Canadians said that their mental health has worsened as a result of physical distancing. And that survey also reveals that COVID-19 doesn't impact all communities equally. In fact, East Asian Canadians report a disproportionate mental health impact from the pandemic as a result of targeted racist attacks, violence, and discrimination. The survey is a reminder that mental health isn't just about what's in your head. It's about the circumstances in which you were born, where you live, and what's happening in your community. Since the start of COVID-19, there has been a rise in anti-Asian hate crimes across Canada. And when we think about the social determinants of physical and mental health, race, ethnicity, and gender are critical factors due to racism, xenophobia, misogyny, and other forms of discrimination. And this holds true for Indigenous peoples too. In a recent Statistics Canada crowdsourcing study, 60% of Indigenous participants indicated that their mental health had worsened as a result of physical distancing in the COVID era, that their days were full of stress. And that study found that Indigenous participants were more likely than non-Indigenous participants to report fair or poor mental health. Now, of course, we can all understand feeling stress and anxiety and depression and loneliness in the middle of a global pandemic that promises no end in sight is a fundamentally human response to the circumstances. We're not just brains walking around in a human suit. We're living organisms who respond to our environment, whether it's our built environment or our natural environment. Now, the built environment, the communities that we live in, the economic system that we work in, that impacts our mental health and life chances in so many ways. But income inequality is the river that runs through it. It's a major social determinant of mental health. And so let's talk about that. Income inequality is at the root of many of our social, physical, and mental health problems. In their important book, The Spirit Level, Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett demonstrated how societies that tolerate high levels of income inequality suffer. Everyone suffers when there's lots of income inequality, even the rich. They suffer from worse health and mental health outcomes, from higher crime rates, less trust in public institutions, and less trust in each other. In their newest book, The Inner Level, Wilkinson and Pickett drill down further on how income inequality impacts people's physical and mental health. And at the heart of their analysis is a simple observation. The pursuit of economic growth fails to protect people from the mounting burdens of stress, anxiety, and mental illness. They write about the deep psychology of inequality, where people become obsessed with social status and the pursuit of their own success, how they become rooted in an individualized view of the world, measuring their success against where they are along the social gradient, rather than looking at success through a collective well-being lens. Wilkinson and Pickett write that inequality makes problems with social gradients worse. It affects who we mix with as our lives become defined and restricted by class and status. It affects social cohesion, the sense that we're all in it together. It increases anxieties about status and the pursuit of more. And it heightens consumerism and conspicuous consumption. Wilkinson and Pickett find that this toxic combination of factors derived from inequality and the pursuit of more impacts our mental health in profound ways. Mental health and infant mortality rates are 2 to 3 times higher in more unequal countries. The stress of social status differences are felt even more acutely by those who are in the lower rungs of the income ladder. Factors that influence social status, such as anxieties about exams and jobs and money and debt, household debt, they not only impact mental health, they also affect people's physical health because it reduces their life expectancy. The anxiety reduces the number of friendships in your lives. It reduces the amount of engagement that you might have in your community. It can lead to social isolation. And so the conclusion is income inequality affects mental health, and mental health impacts physical health. They're intertwined. And that's something that I hope we really think about during a pandemic that impacts people differently depending on our income level, the type of work that we do, whether we're raising children on our own or as a couple, whether we live alone or not, whether we have the means to stay physically isolated and to order in food and grocery delivery in order to limit public contact, whether we have the ability to keep paying the rent or the mortgage if our jobs are impacted by COVID-19. Many people are going to fall further behind because of COVID-19. It was already a struggle to get by in an economic system that awards the minority of people with the biggest share of the income pie, while the rest of us were pretty much left to scramble over the crumbs. And that's really been the story in Canada for about the last 4 decades. Between 1982 and 2017, the real market incomes of the richest 1% grew by, on average, $286,000. So let's compare that the same time period. What happened to the average market incomes for the bottom half of Canadians? Their market income decreased by $1,400 over that period. They lost ground. And that explains a lot of the middle class anxiety that you hear about in the news. And we know it's even worse for Canadians who are in the bottom of the income ladder, who are trapped in poverty. COVID-19 threatens to exacerbate these inequalities. My colleague David McDonald looked at who's gained working hours in Canada since the economy came to a halt in March, and now we've been slowly reopening it. And long story short, the lower down the income ladder you are, the greater the work disruption you are likely to have experienced. And that's in part because the pandemic has hit lower paying jobs the hardest, such as retail, accommodation, tourism, the service sector. These are sectors that are not typically that hard hit during recessions, but they've been devastated in the pandemic and the economic slowdown. And those jobs probably aren't returning quickly. Before COVID-19 struck, Canada was already tolerating high levels of income inequality. Disparities between workers are heightened by factors like race, ethnicity, and gender. For every dollar that a white man in Canada earns on average, racialized women earn just 59 cents. Racialized men earn just 78 cents. Racialized immigrant men earn just 71 cents. Meanwhile, the prevalence of poverty among First Nations children is 3.8 times higher than non-racialized, non-Indigenous children. These are dramatic income disparities. They contribute to physical and mental inequities, mental health inequities. The presence of COVID-19 and the necessary public health steps that we need to take to protect each other shines a light on the existing inequities that were already baked into the system. And now enter the year 2020, it's basically a dumpster fire. So what do we do next? Well, what if we look at mental health from a collectivist structural point of view? It entails moving beyond the current discourse about mental health. That discourse focuses mostly on destigmatization. And I think we need to go a step further. We need to go deeper than that. Here's what I mean by that. Every year, for instance, celebrities and politicians go public with their mental health issues, the depression, anxiety, as part of the National Bell Let's Talk Day. It's an excellent initiative, and the goal is to destigmatize mental illness, which is an important step to make it safe to talk about mental health and to seek supports. It's a crucial part of moving forward. Yet every year, I can't help but think that the conversation remains stuck at the me level. Like, what can I do to work through mental health issues if I can screw up the courage to talk about it and find help? If I can afford to pay for private counseling, because there's not a lot of public services available. And if counseling is even available in my community. The focus on my mental health overlooks the systemic issues that can determine whether you or I struggle with mental health challenges in the first place or can readily address them. Systemic issues such as inequality. So let's take that destigmatization conversation a step further, because stigma is a structural phenomenon. Let's tackle the structural factors that impact mental health and well-being. Let's move beyond the medicalization of mental health and treat the root causes. Danius Puris, the United Nations Special Health Rapporteur, he argues that mental health can't be treated like physical health problems. He's also highly critical of the pharmaceutical drug companies, saying government action is the antidote, not drugs. Government action is the antidote. I see COVID-19 as the impetus to move toward an upstream approach to mental health. Not only because more Canadians are going to emerge from this pandemic with mental health issues, and a lot of people will be seeking help and looking for services, but something else happened. Something shifted this spring when government shut down our economy and created new supports out of thin air to help most people shelter down at the start of the pandemic. And what we saw collectively was the important role of government in putting public health ahead of the endless drive toward economic growth. Those of us who weren't working flat out on the front lines of healthcare, long-term care, food, retail, and delivery had time to step back and reflect. Some people may never go back to the daily grind of the commute and working in an office. Some people might question the constant pursuit of success and social status. They might make different life choices. And some people might find that they have no choices at all. Some parents may not be able to go back into the labor market because of a lack of jobs or a lack of affordable childcare. They might stay home with their young children instead. That could set women's rights back by a generation, where they remain sidelined from the labor market and where their children might not get access to the early learning and socialization opportunities that we know kids need to get hardwired to perform well in life, and services that we know kids from higher income families can readily access. Income is a major determinant of physical and mental health. But income interacts and overlaps with other social determinants of physical and mental health to reinforce long-standing health inequities. And we see glimpses of that in COVID-19, with COVID-19. So in Toronto, where I live, studies show that COVID-19 has hit Black communities harder, and those communities tend to be lower income. Now, compound those stresses with evidence that Black communities in Toronto are over-policed, that Black, racialized, and Indigenous people are more likely to face police brutality and also are more likely to end up in prison. And you can start connecting some of the dots. In an upcoming study by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives intern Heather Lawson, it shows that Black and Indigenous women make up only 4% of the population in Canada, but they make up almost half of all women prisoners. And Lawson submits that the amount of money that we're spending on women's prisons and incarceration would be far better spent on addressing the root causes of incarceration: racism, colonialism, poverty, trauma, and mental illness. Now, some people might say access to mental health services is the #1 thing that we can do to address all of these issues. And access is indeed a huge barrier for far too many Canadians who want to seek help, but it just doesn't exist in the community, or the wait list is too long, or the cost is out of reach. Access is important, but it's a downstream measure. It's still about repairs, not about addressing those structural issues. So let's go back to the UN's Danius Puris, who recommends that governments institute better early childhood and school programs, produce rapid intervention programs for disadvantaged children, implement policies to reduce inequality and exclusion, strengthen unionization of the workforce, and improve financial assistance for those who are in need. And this, he says, would be the best vaccine against mental illness. He's addressing those structural issues. So at the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, we're working on the same. We've just released a Just Recovery Plan, a COVID Just Recovery Plan, so that all Canadians can emerge from this pandemic on a more equal playing field. Our Just Recovery Plan includes basic income standards for people who are not in the paid labor market, a minimum wage, that's a living wage, affordable and adequate housing, food security, a national universal public child care program that's available anywhere you live in Canada, pathways into higher education, skills, and training jobs, expanded access to the Canada Child Benefit and to employment post-CERB will be really crucial. Employment and pay equity, labor protections for all workers, but especially for migrant and temporary foreign workers who are especially vulnerable to exploitation, and a strategy to address anti-Asian, anti-Black, and anti-Indigenous racism and discrimination. These solutions and many more, this isn't all that's in the Just Recovery Plan. It's over 200 pages. It's a comprehensive plan. But if they were implemented by governments, it would result in a healthier and more equal Canada. And you can read more about the Just Recovery Plan if you go to policyalternatives.ca. That Just Recovery Plan will require sustained federal, provincial, and municipal government leadership and even more funding commitments than we've already seen in the COVID-19 crisis. But we also need to take a hard look at how our economy is structured to leave far too many people behind. Jacinda Ardern, New Zealand's Prime Minister, has said economic growth accompanied by worsening social outcomes is not success, it is failure. We're in the middle of a historic moment in Canada where a pandemic is showing us how important public health and well-being is to the functioning of our economy and to our communities. And of course, the most assured path to just recovery is sustainable, decent work for all. But we know this too. The old model of economic growth has failed us. The global just-in-time economy rewarded some businesses and workers while forcing a growing number of workers into precarious, low-paying jobs. And I'm most interested these days in jurisdictions that are seriously implementing inclusive economic tools to create more stable jobs for everyone. So for example, in Cleveland, the Democracy Collaborative is creating social enterprise opportunities for marginalized and racialized workers who otherwise would have no foothold into the labor market. They've created a worker-owned laundry cooperative that does laundry for the local hospitals. And that's creating good local jobs for marginalized and racialized workers, many of them who had been incarcerated and had trouble finding work. And now they have jobs and they've got hope and agency. And all of this is happening while keeping those public anchor investments in the local community. And I think that we could create similar opportunities here in Canada, leveraging government procurement and infrastructure spending to create a more inclusive economy. For instance, turning a government infrastructure investment like building a bridge or new affordable housing, which is happening, turning those investments into community benefit agreements where we employ marginalized workers and we train them to work their way into the skilled trades. And the skilled trades are part of the future of Canada's middle class. That benefits those workers and it benefits everyone. In Toronto, the Eglinton Crosstown Light Rail Transit project became the first large-scale infrastructure community benefit agreement project in Ontario. And its goal was pretty simple. It's like, we want to give historically disadvantaged communities and equity-seeking groups apprenticeship and journey person opportunities. And that's an example of what's possible when we aim to disrupt structural barriers in the economy. And when we recognize the power of local public anchor institutions. And by that, I mean your city council, hospitals, universities, to leverage their public spending for community well-being. And now there's no time like the present, because COVID-19 has disrupted supply chains. It's strained the old economic model. We're in a period of major transition right now. And we must be open to new and inclusive ways of organizing our economy. And as we think about our economy and rethink our economy, we can draw inspiration from New Zealand, where the government there has been committed to well-being budgeting. Yes, economic growth is still included as a measure of success there, but it's not the only measure. All new government spending in New Zealand must advance one of these priorities: improving mental health, reducing child poverty, addressing the inequalities faced by Indigenous peoples, thriving in a digital age, and transitioning to a low emission, sustainable economy. Now that is upstream thinking. Canada would benefit from well-being budgeting approaches within an inclusive economy model in so many ways. Money spent on downstream health and mental health interventions could be redirected to invest in the root causes. And there's no time like the present. We're living in a challenging moment in history, much like previous generations faced during the Great Depression and the Second World War. So I'm going to just end with a little story about my mom. Here's my mom and I when I was 3. And the story about my mother is that she was born into poverty in rural Saskatchewan in 1935, in the middle of a Great Depression. So her family was very poor. You know, they had no running water, no indoor toilet, of course. They had an outhouse. The one significant thing about Christmas time is that a box of mandarin oranges would magically appear in the household. And it was a really big deal because first it meant they had fresh fruit in the middle of winter. But secondly, mandarin oranges come wrapped in this really soft green tissue paper. And so it replaced the Sears Roebuck's catalog as toilet paper in the middle of the winter in that outhouse. And it's just an example of that they were pretty poor. And despite that level of deep poverty, my mother insists that she was actually born in the luckiest time because everyone was struggling during this period. They realized that they couldn't go it alone. As farmers, neighbors knew to help each other out. The community came together in those hard times, in those years of drought. As a generation, my mother came of age at a time when there was a consensus in Canada that governments also had to play a role to lift more people out of poverty and give people a better chance in life. Labor laws over that period of time made it easier for workers to organize into unions, and the rise of unionization intertwined with the dramatic decline in income inequality. And that's how we built the middle class over the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. And it's how we improved our standard of living. And in 1965, the year I was born, Canada had a minority federal government, and that government did several things that were life-changing. It implemented a public pension plan, which dramatically reduced seniors' poverty. It made post-secondary education more accessible and affordable. So it meant that in the course of my lifetime, a kid like me could be the first in her immediate family to go and get a university degree or 3. It introduced universal public health care, which benefits us all. And that was just in 1 year. That was just round 1. So now I think it's time for round 2. I think that we have a once in a generation opportunity to get at the structural issues that exacerbate income inequality, health, and mental health inequities. And this is our generational challenge. And I think this is our moment to say, if we're going to survive a global pandemic, let's make sure that future generations benefit in the way that my generation benefited from the public policies that were implemented over the course of a lifetime. And were completely game-changing. So this is our once in a generation challenge. And the question for us all is, will we take it? Thank you. And I look forward to Q&A and more discussion.
Yes, and I'd like to thank you very much and open it up to questions. I know you've challenged a lot of our thinking, and the session Q&A is open. Just beware that people who are live streaming can ask questions on the YouTube. There's a place for questions there that you can ask, and there's someone monitoring those. And for those of you who are in the forum, you can ask your question using the session Q&A, and I will watch for the questions, and then I can pose the questions to you. That's okay?
Okay, yes, thank you.
People want to start thinking about what would they ask if they had the chance, and write it in your session Q&A. Would be great.
Or they could tell us which measures they would do first. What's the most radical thing you would want?
Okay, there you go. What would you want first? And that you can put that in the Q&A as well. So I'll write it in there. What steps would you take first?
I have a comment. I'm sorry. I'm not finding my session Q&A is really working for me, so I just want to talk. That's okay. I'll have to be quite honest with you. I started my university education in Manitoba. I'm actually not from the Atlantic provinces. And I was thinking all of these things when I started university in the year 2000, because I was born in 1981. So I actually went to law school with the specific goal of eradicating poverty and lifting up families. So I just don't really, I'm just really overwhelmed because I feel like this is something I've been thinking about for so many years. And I'm wondering, why are we only having this conversation now?
That's I share your frustration for sure. And we've been trying to have it for quite some time. You know what? I think that sometimes people need to have a shock to the system or a series of shocks to the system. And when you think about it, we've had a number of shocks to the system. You know, it was just in 2008-9 when we had a complete global recession, economic meltdown. And there were a lot of us talking about maybe now things are bad enough that we'll ask for systems change. I think that COVID-19 changes everything. Because everyone is impacted in some shape or form. And it shows the value of governments that put public health front and center and the importance of that, not only to personal and community well-being, but you need public health in order to have a functioning economy. And that's what COVID-19 has shown us. And so I think that, and I hope that it's an opportunity and that it's a conversation that we have. And we know that our governments, and especially the federal government, is talking about major changes. And I think that what they need to hear is a lot of support to ensure that, that when they're moving forward, the public is fully behind them. There's every public opinion poll that I see show that the majority of Canadians support what's been happening here, support everything that the federal government has been doing to make sure that people don't completely fall over the cliff, and they want that sustained support. So I think that just we're experiencing something as a country that we haven't experienced, certainly in my lifetime, that the level of impact that the pandemic has had on our reality and hopefully on our thinking.
Okay, any other questions that you want to pose to Trish? Are you just all deep in thought?
Yeah, my question is, if all of the money is put into a basic income for every single human being, like I already mentioned this idea even on PEI to as a Dr. Jacqueline Goodwin. I attended her session on kids' mental health, and we talked all about the wraparound services. And I said, well, why is this not available to the parents and to the adults? And I wasn't even really given a response. So like, I'm not really understanding why we're saying we're going to put supports here, supports there. Let's support the supports everywhere. Then that's your whole point, right? Then we don't have to spend all that money when people are in crisis or already harmed or whatever. So like, where, like, direct me to the research I should be reading that shows, like, look, for every dollar that goes into preventing someone from needing to use the hospital or those public services, like, what's the best research we have right now on that, those dollars?
There's a number of studies, and I promise to share a few links tomorrow in the Whova chat for you. But there's a number of studies in terms of more upstream investments in healthcare. In Finland, they did a comprehensive 2-year experiment with basic income and found that that improved people's mental health outcomes dramatically. Lots of studies coming out of Quebec, where Quebec's early learning and childcare system is more affordable and accessible, and it actually shows that literally pays for itself, because if you have affordable, accessible childcare, it enables parents to go out and work in the labor market, and so that income gets taxed back and it pays for itself. So there's a number of those types of studies out there.
Trish, there's a question here that's showing up in the Q&A, and the person is thanking you so much, and then she's asking, or he's asking, do you have a sense of whether or not government is or will be on board with the type of overhaul you described as being needed?
Okay, all right, so here's my crystal ball. Let's see. Look, I hope so. Certainly the last couple of days, I've seen news stories saying the federal government is, looking to do like sweeping social changes. And I know the public opinion shows that, that there'd be a whole lot of support for that. But I also know that they won't do it, unless they know that there is broad public support for that. So I think that's a huge conversation that we need to have with each other, with our friends and family and neighbors, and talk to each other about how COVID-19 changes everything, and how we have an opportunity right now, our generation, to resolve a lot of these problems that I think we got complacent about. I think we got complacent about income inequality. We certainly got complacent about child poverty, Indigenous poverty. We are one of the richest countries in the planet, and we have the resources and the ability to make these fundamental investments that's good for us now, but that will pay off in generations from now. Because that's the other thing that the research shows, that the more we invest, especially the earlier you invest on people for their life chances, then the better off they are in the future. And so we could actually undo a lot of the income inequality and poverty trends that we've been just living with complacently for the last 4 decades.
Thanks, Trish. I see Malcolm has his hand up, and there are 2 ways you can ask questions. Malcolm had put his hand up, and I noticed there are, there's a comment in the Q&A. Also want to ask, Malcolm, I'll let you go ahead, but I just want to check with the staff to see if there's anybody who is writing comments on the online live stream. So if you can just let me know that, I'll let Malcolm go ahead and then I'll watch for your message. If you could send me a text, that'd be super.
Thanks, Patsy. Trish, somebody else is going to do the official thanking, but I just wanted to say thank you to you personally for your powerful remarks, which have covered the whole gamut of issues that are at the root of the mental health challenges we are experiencing in the COVID era. And it's just to me, it's overwhelming, and I've been at this a very long time. It's overwhelming to hear it all so beautifully woven together in a powerful argument for the things you just talked about. I was going to ask a question about what you might say to the Atlantic premiers, but I think you've already answered it in your just previous remarks. So I'm looking forward to reviewing some of those recent references that you've made, and also to trying to capture the essence of what you've been talking about as we formulate a policy agenda to take to the Atlantic premiers. So that's not a question, that's a comment. Thank you so much.
Okay,
fabulous. Thank you, Malcolm. And I mean, the advice that I would give to all of the premiers and all of the mayors across the country is you can't just let the federal government do the heavy lifting. I mean, the federal government has to do a lot of the heavy lifting, but we actually need to be arm in arm on this one because the challenges are too steep.
Thank you, Trish. There's time for one more question, and then I'll call on Philip Brown, to our mayor, to thank you. Sylvie, I see your hand is up.
Thank you so much, Patsy. Thank you, Trish. Was a wonderful keynote there. I'm wondering about what we are experiencing now. I love the shift and the push and the impetus that the present CERB, or as some people call it, CURB, is getting, that it assures people that there is a safety net, and we want everyone to have a safety net. At the same time, we have the experience of companies, especially small to medium-sized companies, saying, well, this is discouraging folks to come back to work. And I've seen that in especially one of the medium-sized companies that I'm more closely associated with, where 90% of the folks did not choose or chose not to come back, citing various reasons. And one had to go ahead and quickly start hiring temporary staff members who comprised largely of school-going youth as well as seniors. And the two categories that were not receiving the CURB benefits. I love to be able to have universal social security, a livable income, and I'm just wondering, how do we go ahead and balance the two? What's the way ahead?
Excellent question, and an important one that we have to work through as well. So the first thought that I have when I hear a business person saying that that these supports, CERB or CURB, is keeping people from going back to their jobs, then I ask, how does this reflect on the quality of the jobs that you are offering in the first place, and the working conditions? And where does workers' rights to have health and safety come into it? And so if then now they're going to that next tier of very desperate workers who weren't covered, who fell through the cracks, how does that reflect about your business? And is this the business model that is sustainable for your community? Is it inclusive? Is it something that it makes the community more engaged? Does it raise our standard of living? And if it doesn't, then maybe this is the question to really seriously question. This is the time to seriously question your business model. And, you know, I work with a lot of living wage employers across the country, and a number of them say that once they decided to pay a living wage, they actually had greater worker retention. Workers were happier and more engaged in the job. It changed everything. So I think my point about, you know, we need decent work, we need a adequate level of income, we need inclusive economy models and well-being budgeting by governments. And if you put these all together, then we all end up with healthier communities and more vibrant communities. And guess what every business needs to survive and thrive? Healthy, vibrant communities. And so what are those businesses doing to contribute to that? And it's part of their long-term future as well.
Trish, I've got another one for you, and I really mean that meant that it should be, you know, time management is essential, but this is such a good question because I'm sure it's on a lot of people's minds. And I wanted to also say in the chat, there are many resources that are being listed. So it's not just the Q&A that's getting attention, it's the chat and Whova as well. What is this question is do you think that divisiveness that is showing up in the media makes this more difficult to get moving? It seems to be somewhat self-perpetuating.
Exactly right, bang on. And I mean, we see what happens in the US when media and politicians foment polarization and division. It gets worse before it gets worse. And so we can look at that experiment and say, let's not do that. And so I think that it's actually really a project for each and every one of us. You know, I worry very much about the growing polarization in Canada. And, you know, it seems to be slightly in suspension mode because of COVID-19. But, you know, we had the Wexit, you know, in the West rear its ugly head. There's a lot of divisive discussions on social media, people yelling at each other, judging each other, calling each other out. And that just gets people, that requires people to, it forces people to dig in their heels. It actually doesn't change the conversation. And so I think part of our job, and it's for each and every one of us, when we're talking with people who are saying something that just seems like the polar opposite of what is upstream, that it's not a question of now we're going to fight or we're not going to talk. This is when a new conversation has to happen. This is where we need to reach out and understand where's that coming from. And there I go back to Wilkinson and Pickett's research that shows societies that tolerate high levels of income inequality have less trust in public institutions and less trust in each other. And so it's all intertwined, but I do think that we have a responsibility to have those conversations from a genuinely compassionate, curious standpoint so that we look for points of consensus and connection instead of increasingly adding to that polarization and division and hate and anger.
Wonderful. On that note and on that tone, I am going to ask our Mayor, Philip Brown, if he would bring thanks, and then I will close with a few comments. Thank you. Philip, do you want to unmute and put on your video? Okay, it seems to be quiet. I'm not exactly, oh. Okay, I'm not exactly sure what happened there, but given the time of the evening, and I know the intention that as sponsor of the keynote, I'm sure that he would be pleased, especially, there he is, okay. Hi, Philip, I wonder, I just started to speak for you, so I'm glad to see you back online again.
That's a great thing about Zoom. You can zoom in anytime or zoom out.
Yeah, so no, I was just asking if you would bring thanks for our keynote, and then I'll have a few closing comments. So,
Well, Trish, as I said in my opening, it's been a great pleasure to be a sponsor of the Atlantic Summer Institute. It's very satisfying to know that it's based here in Charlottetown, the Atlantic Summer Institute, and that we had the opportunity to sponsor such a great event. And I know that I'll be watching over the next couple of days, just zooming in, zooming out when I can. So thank you very much. Merci beaucoup on behalf of the city of Charlottetown and all the citizens of this great city, birthplace of Confederation.
Thank you. And I'm so sorry I couldn't be in your beautiful city right now.
You'll make it one of these days.
I will.
And as a bit of a teaser, I don't know if you can see it or not, but as a bit of a teaser for Prince Edward Island, this is our signature gift for Keynote speakers, and we will be sending it to you. So I hope you have your correct postal address on your registration. Otherwise, it could be floating anywhere, right?
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Well, this was actually created by a local artist, especially for the Summer Institute, and it's from our children's program. So we think it's pretty special and like to share it once a year with our keynote speaker. So it will be coming to you.
I will hang it with pride. Thanks very much.
You're welcome. So in closing, I want to thank everybody for your participation here this evening. And for those of you who are online and live streaming, thank you very much for coming on board. I'm sure that Trish has given everyone lots to think about, lots of challenges for our discussions ahead over the next 2 days. I was saying to a few people who met last Friday, some of the speakers, that I was really motivated in terms of the structure of how we're going to take this forward by webinar that I went to that was put on by the National Collaborating Center on Determinants of Health. And Dennis Raphael was talking about the social determinants of health and what are the factors that do not allow for further investment in the social determinants of health when we have all the evidence. And he outlined 3 things. One was policy, the other was politics, and the other was economics. And I think you hit on all of those tonight. And that's really the way in which we have structured this this evening and over the next couple of days. So we'll be touching on all those topics and lots of debate and lots of discussion. So I guess I want to say thank you again. We will be here tomorrow morning, and we start the first session. We'll be starting at 8:40. It's early, but we have lots to do in the day so that there are breaks. We don't want anybody zoomed out, and we do have breaks. We have a good lunch break. We have music that you can listen to and lots of things that were sent out today in terms of some links to yoga, ways to move. We're going to encourage movement so that your brain is also moving, and we look after ourselves while we're learning about how we can make system change and structural change and look after others. There's a scavenger hunt each day with a prize, and that will be so that you can get to explore the Hoover site, go to the exhibits, talk to people, interact, and that went out to you today by email. If anybody didn't get it, please let us know, but it's there. And there'll be another one that goes out tomorrow. And I think that we'll see the registrants tomorrow and know that we'll have more conversations for sure, and that everybody can be thinking about what kind of impact that I can have on policy and what conversations am I going to have around my supper table, what conversations am I going to have around breakfast or with my family and my friends tomorrow. So on that note, I hope everyone has a good evening. I want to thank Trish once again, thank the showcase presenters, Malcolm for the highlights, and all the staff. And one of the people I didn't thank yet is Chantal, who has been, Chantal, where are you? Do you want to turn your video on for just a minute? Chantal has been coordinating the youth leadership program, and we have 20 youth ages 18 to 25 who are with us here over the next while, and they started this morning at 9 o'clock, and their morning starts at 8 tomorrow. So lots going on, and Chantal is also very artistic and a musician, and so she put together that opening slideshow that you saw when you first logged on. So there'll be more of the same tomorrow. I hope we have fun and we learn together. Thank you very much. We're coming together the best way we know how, and we'll learn how to master this online learning. Take care. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Patsy, and good night.
Thank you, Patsy. Thank you, Trish.